is Chuck Creasy. I was in Vietnam in 1968 and early 1969. I was a forward observer attached to an infantry company. I was the 3rd of the 82nd Artillery attached to Bravo Company of the 196 Light Infantry Brigade. And I had an unfinished tour. I was only there a little over 8 months. Broke my foot and came home early, so that was fortuitous for me. Well, that's a bit of a story. I had malaria, dysentery, jungle rot, minor wound, and then we were on stand down one month back in the rear in July, and we constructed a basketball goal on the side of a palm tree, and we were all out there having some libations and playing basketball, and one guy pushed another guy over my back, and he fell on me and broke my foot. Didn't think it was a big deal. Went to the hospital there in July, and they said, well, we're going to have to send you to Japan because there's some type of bone marrow disease we're not sure of, and so we'll send you over there and let this thing heal up a bit, and you can come back and finish your tour. And I said, okay. So they put a cast on up to my crotch for a broken foot, actually a broken left fifth metatarsal, my little toe, my left foot. Thought it was a little overdone, but I got to Japan and went to see the orthopedic surgeon there, and he said, let me see what happened. He looked at my records and saw that I had a broken toe, and he said, well, that'll heal pretty quickly. And we got to talking, and he had taken his pre-med at the University of Tennessee, the same time I was at Tennessee Tech, 60 miles away. And he knew people I knew at Tech, I knew people he knew at UT, and we just got to be buddies. And he said, so you're a lifer, right? You want to go back and finish your tour? And I said, oh, no. I was drafted and wound up going to OCS, and I'm married and I've got a baby that I've never seen. So no, I'm not a lifer. And he goes, well, I tell you what, this foot could be really bad. He said, I think I'll just send you home. Boom. Yeah, and I had, Marnie had gotten a couple of notifications from the Army on some of the other stuff I'd had. And so when I called her from Japan, she said, what is it, Chuck? What happened? And I told her, and she said, you're lying to me. You promised me you'd tell me the truth. Now, what really happened? And I said, Marnie, I've got a broken toe. So I felt a little funny about coming home early with a broken toe, but as it turns out, it worked out pretty good. Yeah. Well, yeah, I was drafted in '66. I had finished my sophomore year in college, and my lovely wife Marnie and I met there our sophomore years and decided to get married. So at the end of our sophomore year, interestingly enough, I was on academic probation and had to sit out a quarter. And once I did, I immediately got my draft notice when they found out I wasn't enrolled in college. So, you know, I went through basic and AIT, and I'd already had 2 years of ROTC in college. Back then at state universities, at least in Tennessee, it was mandatory for all guys to take 2 years of ROTC. Well, I already knew all the basic stuff, and I get to basic training and they make me a platoon leader immediately because I knew all the ranks and the commands and marches and all. And they started working on me then to go to OCS. You know, son, you're officer material. We need young officers, blah, blah. So from basic training at Fort Campbell, I went to Fort Ord, California for AIT. And they continued the pressure. You need to go to OCS. You need to go to OCS. And so Marnie and I decided together that that'd be a good thing to do. So I went to OCS at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, artillery OCS. And it was a bitch. I'm telling you, it was rough. But 6 long, crazy months. And once I finished and was commissioned as a second lieutenant, My first duty station was in Fort Irwin, California, in the Mojave Desert. It was an artillery base, and we trained on 105 and 155 howitzers out there. And from there, we were there almost a year, and I got orders for Vietnam. And had a 30-day leave, came home, and my wife was pregnant with our first child, and I had to ship out. So that was tough. You know, I knew it was coming. I mean, young junior officers were falling like crazy in Vietnam, and I knew it was inevitable, but there was always hope that I maybe would miss it, you know. It's really funny, when we were at Fort Ord, it was 60 miles straight out in the Mojave Desert from Barstow. Nothing in sight except, you know, palmetto trees and cactus. So we get to the post, and it was really pretty nice. It was a little like an oasis in the middle of the desert. We came over a hill, and you saw the post down below, and it was all green, trees, flowers, and I'm going, what? This is the desert. So I check in to my unit, and I was asking the first sergeant how this place became what it was, and he said, well, that's an interesting story. He said during the Second World War, General Patton trained his 3rd Division out here. They were in Barstow, and all these soldiers kept getting drunk and thrown in jail and stuff, so the city council came to him and said, you know, you're going to have to do something about this. We cannot keep this up. And so Patton said, well, I'll do the best I can. Well, they kept harassing him, so one day he picked up the whole 3rd Army artillery and moved 60 miles straight out in the desert, and they're going, this guy's crazy. He's going to go out there, you know, starve to death, you know, thirst. Well, he had his engineers reconning the area, and they found an underground river that was still prehistoric underground river, and he built a post on top of that. So I got there in October of '68. Yeah, of '68, and he was born on Christmas Eve in December. So I was there 3 months before he was born. The Red Cross was supposed to have done that, and I didn't get a notification. We were back out of the field on our fire support base for our 1 week out of the month usually. And it was Christmas, so we came in out of the field and we were on our fire support base. And I knew it was about time, Marnie was about due, but I had no messages. So on late Christmas Eve night, I get a call to go to headquarters, and I go up there, and they said, we've just had a ham operator from Nashville, Tennessee call us that your son's been born. So this guy went to church with us, and he'd been working the ham radio all day long trying to get the message to me, and he did. And I didn't get a notification from the Red Cross for 3 more days. So kind of interesting. And Marnie and I kind of disagreed on that. She wanted to name him Chuck Creasy Jr. And I said, let's don't do that. Put a junior on this guy. And she said, no, if anything happens to you, blah, blah, you know. So it was Chuck Creasy Jr., and we knew that. Interestingly, though, I was reading a paperback book while I was over there about an Indian princess by the name of Chanda, an Indian princess from India. And I was just taken by that name, and so I wrote Marnie and I said, if we ever have a girl, I want to name her Chanda. So sure enough, the next one was a girl, and she happened to be twins, and they were very premature, and we lost her little brother, but we had Chanda. So yeah, I got orders to come back to the States after Dr., and I won't mention his name, and I had a wonderful conversation. So I boarded a medevac plane and made the trip back to Fort Campbell. And when I got back in, my mom and dad and my wife and my grandmother came up to Fort Campbell to get me with my new son, which, boy, you talk about crazy. It was unreal. I've got some photographs of me holding him up first time I saw him. I still had the big cast on my leg. But so I had a 30-day leave, so we spent that at home and kind of got to know the little guy, and you know, Marnie and I rekindled our love for each other, and it was just outstanding. And I put in for an early out because I only had like 6 or 8 months left to do in the Army, so I put in with the Department of the Army for an early out, and they absolutely denied it immediately. I wished I'd have kept the letter I got back from the Pentagon. It said, in essence, it said, we have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars training you to be an officer and a gentleman, and you are not granted an early out. So I spent a 30-day leave here, kind of recuperating, and got orders to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So I'll go down there, and I had 6 months left to do. A month after I was there, I had a relapse of malaria and almost died. It was terrible. And they gave me headquarters company. Now I was a first lieutenant at this time. Headquarters company on post was a major slot or a light colonel. So they get, you know, I wound up with that assignment, and it was a booger because Fort Jackson was where so many guys came back and were short, waiting to get out, and they were just, you know, wild and crazy. I spent most of my time downtown in Columbia, South Carolina, getting them out of jail, you know. And so I did that for 3 months. Had 3 or 4 months to go, and my early out came through. So our furniture was all stored at Fort Campbell. They moved it to Fort Jackson, gave us a house and all that. I was there 3 months and got my early out, so I came back, ETS. So I took a medevac plane back to the States. We came into Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and my mom and dad, my wife, Marnie, my grandmother, and little Chuck came to pick me up, and it was unbelievable. I can't even describe. I knew he was there, but nobody proved it yet. So I grabbed him and I was holding him. So from there, instead of going back to college, Tennessee Tech, and finishing up in architecture, I decided, okay, I'm married, I have a baby, I've been to war, I'm going to do what I want to do instead of what my folks wanted me to do, which was finish college and be an architect. So I enrolled in art school here in Nashville. It was the best decision I ever made in my life, because I would have made a really bad engineer or architect, because I hate math and science so badly. But and that turned out really great. I started there in '69, early '69, and had the GI Bill, so that helped some. But my wife Marnie was working at Vanderbilt in the chemistry department, and we had this little baby. And so to make ends meet, I would go to school all day and then wait tables at night. So actually I started out as a busboy. Now here I am out of the Army, first lieutenant, people saluting you, been to war, and I started bussing tables. But I did that and was just making great money. This restaurant, really upscale, beautiful restaurant, they just opened it. And he pretty much hired the whole staff from the art school. We all worked there at night, weekends. So I did that for 2 years and met Eric Erickson, who owned the hottest small ad agency in this city at that time. I was in advertising art school, by the way, majoring in advertising design, not fine art. So I met Eric, and he at the restaurant actually, and he told me, we chatted and just kind of hit it off. He told me if I would come by and see him on Monday, that he was looking for a young art director, and he really liked me, and we ought to see if something might work out. I said, well, I've still got like 8 months to do in school. And he said, son, if you come to work for me, that 8 months will be like grad school that you don't have, that you're getting paid for. So I went to see Eric on Monday morning, had 2 little samples, didn't even have my portfolio together, and we talked for 4 hours, and we just hit it off, and he hired me for $7,000 a year. It didn't help us out that much because I was making $300 or $400 a night on tips at Sperry's, so it was a step down, but I got in the business. And from there, I was very fortunate. He did teach me the ad business, and I had a wonderful career in advertising. But when I was in art school, back up a minute, I spent 2 summers studying with John Pike in Woodstock, New York. It's where I fell in love with watercolor. Up until that point in art school, I was painting oils and using pastels and charcoal. But when I had those 2 summers with John, I threw all that away and decided I was going to be a watercolor artist. So I came back, got in the ad business, but I was always painting. You know, I became an award-winning art director and creative director through the years in advertising, and it was a wonderful career. It enabled me to travel and do lots of things that I wouldn't have gotten to do. But I always painted. I always had a little space somewhere we lived that I could hide away and paint. And as our kids grew, they heard me. I never talked about Vietnam as far as the atrocities and the war, the war. But I always said, from the time they were tiny, that I'd love to someday go back and see what happened to that country after we left it in ramshackle shape. So I turned 70 and hadn't been back to Vietnam. So I figured, well, need to mark off that deal on my bucket list. Well, my lovely daughter Shonda and my youngest son Chris came to me and said, Dad, for your 70th birthday, we're taking you back to Vietnam. And they had been working on that for some time, had a beautiful plan laid out. And we went over and spent 16 days and toured the entire country from the Mekong Delta to the Chinese border in the north. And it was amazing. I really couldn't believe what I saw. And so we arrived in Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh City. I can't keep from calling it Saigon, but we had flown 24 or 26 hours. Landed there all tired and worn out, and our first guide that we had, that Shonda had arranged with this Vietnamese lady, an entire tour. So our first guide picked us up at the airport in Saigon, and we were all about half asleep, and he said, well, before I take you to the hotel, do y'all want to just ride around Saigon a little while and see what you say? I said, sure. So the first place we stopped was this beautiful old temple, one of the oldest in South Vietnam at that time, and there was a monk there praying, and I took a couple of photo references there, thinking this will make a beautiful painting when I get home. And that's when it started. I started photographing and sketching, and the entire tour, that's what I did. We went from Saigon to Da Nang, which is the area I was in, Tu Quoc. From Da Nang, we drove back down to Chu Lai, which was our rear division base. From Chu Lai, we drove up to where our LZ was, LZ Baldy. Couldn't go on because it was North Vietnam, or it was a Vietnamese military installation, so we couldn't go up on the mountain to the top, but saw it from where we were. And I was thrilled. Each area we visited in Vietnam, we had a Mercedes van with a driver and a guide who spoke English, and it was unbelievable. The whole time we were there, I never ran into any type of animosity. The Vietnamese people are a sweet-natured people, and most of the folks that are there are much younger than me. And they don't even remember the war, and those that do don't care. They moved on, and Vietnam has emerged and is one of the most striking differences I have ever seen in my life. When I left, we had, blown the hell out of that place, and it was just a mess, but the beauty of the country was there, and I knew how beautiful it was, even during war, and going back after it had healed, and they had remade Vietnam. It was amazing. Saigon was a city of 8 million people, huge skyscrapers, 5-star restaurants and hotels, beautiful homes, a big Autobahn that goes straight through the town, 6 lanes. And when I left, it was a mud rutted road and shacks, basically. I couldn't believe it. We stayed in a beautiful hotel that the American press used when they were there, and it had been renovated. It was a French hotel that was like 120 years old. Unreal. From Saigon, like I say, we went to Chu Lai and Da Nang, the area I was in. We spent the night with a family in a little village called Hoi An, which is an old antique city, and that was unbelievable. And I was sketching and taking photographs the whole time. So from Hoi An, we flew to Hanoi in the north, and spent 3 days in Hanoi. Did the Hanoi Hilton, and a lot of the sites around Hanoi. No, the Hanoi Hilton is a tour.
It is.
Also, the tunnels up north, they've got a tourist trip to those. We didn't do that. Yeah, when we were in Chu Lai, our rear division base, they had built, after the North Vietnamese had taken over the South, they inhabited our military base in Chu Lai. It's now a Vietnamese army installation. And right outside the city, they built a huge monument, steps, about 200 steps up to this 200-foot monument that they built for the Viet Cong and NVA soldiers that had been killed. And that just, I've got some pictures of that too. That just kind of, because I was really anxious to go on the base and see where, the barracks and all that were, but they had taken that over, and it was no entrance. Matter of fact, we drove by it, and I opened the sliding door of the van and took pictures as we went by of the entrance to the post. We couldn't stop, and actually our guide got a little nervous about me hanging out taking pictures because there were Vietnamese guards all around, but that was an interesting deal. So we get to Hanoi, and we do the whole city in 3 days, and really have a beautiful little hotel there we're staying in. And one of the highlights of the trip, from Hanoi we drove up to Halong Bay, which is on the South China Sea, and it's a UNESCO site, and you've probably seen pictures where the mountains jut up out of the ocean. It's absolutely beautiful. We spent 2 days and nights on a boat out on Halong Bay, which was great. And then we flew back to Saigon, spent another day or two in Saigon, and then caught a plane home. So it was a 16-day trip, and we were moving the whole time. And it was, I was just blown away by how far they've come. Of course, the Chinese, the Japanese, and us, and some European countries have helped them along the way, but they're an emerging economy, and it was a communist country, obviously, one of the few left, but you didn't realize you were in a communist country. I mean, people had individual freedoms. I mean, they owned cars, they owned their own businesses, they all had cell phones. And one of our guides told me, he said, you know, I hate the Communist Party, and you don't have to join. He said, most of the people in Vietnam aren't members of the Communist Party.
Really?
But if you decide not to join, you never will be able to move up in society or, you know, the better jobs. But it is communist, but most of the people don't affiliate with that. And I thought that was really interesting. But it just, you know, the people are still as sweet as I remembered them, the farmers and the shopkeepers and you know, the normal everyday people. We never ran into any type of problem the whole time we were there. Da Nang was, I mean, it looks like Hawaii. It looks like a beach in Hawaii, and that was a huge marine installation during the war. There was a place called Monkey Mountain, and that's where they were. Actually, it's Marble Mountain. Most of the marble that's mined and sculpted in Vietnam comes out of that mountain. So they have all types of art galleries and sculpture galleries there. And what they've done with their infrastructure, the bridges, the highways are pretty amazing. And I think a lot of that was the Chinese. But the bridge in Da Nang that comes across the bay is done like a dragon. The far side of it is the tail, and it's sculpted out. Now this is a 6-lane interstate going across it. On the front end is the head of the dragon, and about every 30 minutes the dragon's head opens up and shoots fire out. It's just unbelievable, you know. They've done a marvelous job, and they seem to be happy. I mean, everyone was celebrating in Hoi An, this beautiful old historic city. They have a balloon show every night where down the river all these little boats and craft come through, and they release balloons that are lit inside. And it's just, I don't know, it's just amazing. And the food, unreal. And everything was so reasonable. That's so cheap. That's what we couldn't get over. You could have a fine meal in a 5-star restaurant for $12, or, you know, beers in the pubs were like 40 cents. You know, it was talking U.S. money. But yeah, it was an experience that really touched my heart. From the time I left, I felt sad for the people of Vietnam and the country itself, because we absolutely destroyed their infrastructure and their culture. And but 55 years later, they're rocking and rolling. So I was a little concerned initially about going back. I'd never heard anything bad about vets that had gone back, but still, I was a little concerned, and I wondered how it would make me feel being back on that land. But it was joyful. It really was, and I'm so glad I did it. I'm so glad my children enabled me to do it and was able to see it with me, you know, which and they ask all kinds of questions. They got a really good education from the guides and from me as we were touring, you know. So I think it was a blessing for both of them too. When I got back, you know, not being a great writer, but more of a visual creative, I started painting what I had seen over there and stuff that had inspired me. And my good friend David Wright, who just lives up the road a ways in Gallatin, and I critique each other's work. You know, he'll do a new painting, say, Chuck, come up here and let's smoke a cigar and tell me what you think, and I do the same thing. So the first painting I finished was the little girl in pink on the Mekong River, and I took it up to David's, and he said, oh man, Chuck, this is great. He said, how many have you done? I said, well, that's my first one. I didn't know how many I would wind up doing, but I wound up with 21 pieces. And David told me when I showed him my piece, he said, you know, and I knew David was in Vietnam. We've been friends for 55 years, but he was there 4 years before me, and he'd already been to art school, the same art school I wound up going to when I got back from Vietnam. And he said, I've got some work here somewhere that I did while I was over there. And I said, really? Had no idea. We'd never talked about the war or Vietnam. So he went to his flat files and pulled out an envelope and pulled out these beautiful little pencil drawings and a couple little paintings, but mainly drawings of South Vietnamese soldiers, kids, mountain yards, and I was blown away. David's a fantastic artist anyway, but he'd never really shown those to anybody, but some of his family. I'd never seen them. So we were sitting there contemplating that and my first painting I'd done, and I said, you know, we ought to have a two-man show. And from there we started kicking ideas around and decided that we would do a show called Vietnam, Two Soldiers. It was Vietnam, then and now. Two soldiers, two artists, two journeys. We came up with that name and thought it was kind of cool. So we needed a place to have this show, and I needed to paint more. So we kept it quiet for a while, and I started painting. And I was just on a tear. I'd never done a series with as many paintings, 21 or 22 altogether. And when I was about halfway finished, we approached Cheryl Strychick at Monhaven Arts and Cultural Center about maybe doing a show there, and she was all over it because she has a healing arts program for veterans. So she jumped right on our bandwagon, and we proceeded to design the show and finish the paintings, and David already had his done. He had the easy part, but and we did the show, kicked it off. We came in on a Huey for the opening of the show, which was pretty interesting. Neither one of us had been in a Huey since Vietnam, our time in Vietnam. David happened to be a door gunner on a Huey part of the time when he was over there. And the Huey saved my life about 50 times when we would get extracted from firefights and stuff. So that was a thrill in it of itself. And I think the show has been really interesting. It's, we didn't do any blood and guts and gore and all that stuff. It was the people and the place and scenery and the people David had met while he was actually in country and worked with. So it's got a real educational bent to it, I think, more so than an art show. It's really an exhibition. And there's nothing really negative about it at all. And it's been amazing what's happened since then. It is in its 6th showing now. Monhaven is renting the show out, and we've been everywhere from the Richmond Military Museum to Charlie Daniels' wing of MTSU to, it's most currently been in a small town in Missouri called Ashland, Missouri. It has about 1,500 people, and they have a library, and they wanted the show badly. And interestingly, it was a huge success. They said that, veterans came from all over the state to see it. So we feel pretty good about that, it worked out like it did. And it was therapy for me, and I think David too. So, we'll see where it goes from here. We have been to most of the shows. We didn't make it to Kansas, but all the other shows, David and I were there and spoke. And the vets that came through and their spouses, I mean, lots of tears. you know, remembering a long time ago. But gotten lots of great comments, and I think it's helped some folks, you know. Certainly did me. Yeah, I did all of the advertising and design work for the show, because that's kind of what I did all my life. Yeah, so that's been a real blessing for David and I both, and hopefully for a lot of other people that have seen it. You know, Vietnam is one of the most beautiful countries, and I've traveled a lot, but Vietnam is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Even during the war, if you could, you know, block out the bomb craters and stuff. But it's just a tapestry of lush greens and beautiful water. There's water everywhere, lakes, rivers, of course the ocean, the South China Sea, and the triple canopy jungles, all the way to the tiered rice paddies and the mountains. It's just a beautiful country, and they've done such a great job. It is a heck of a tourist site now. I can't tell you how many tourists we ran into, Europeans, Americans, and it's very reasonably priced. I mean, my goodness, yeah. And interestingly enough, in Da Nang, which looks like Hawaii, they have huge condos and high-rises on the beach, and there are a lot of expats there, European and American. There's a lot of Americans that have moved back over there that were in the war, some that weren't, but yeah, they have a really strong expat community throughout the country. Our second guide that we had in the Chu Lai Da Nang area, really an interesting guy. He was in the South Vietnamese Army, and he happened to be an interpreter for the 101st Airborne, and was based in Chu Lai, my rear base, at the very same time I was there. And so we had wonderful stories to talk back and forth about, and until the North Vietnamese took over the country, he was sent to a re-education camp for 4.5 years, I think he said. That was no fun, and he hates the communists. And it's interesting, his brother got out. He's lived in the States all this time, and we has not been able to get out of the country still after all these years. He still talks about coming to America one of these days, and he's 74 years old. So. But you don't see much at all any evidence of the war. There may be a tank here and there that has a little monument, or, you know, an old tank, or the monument I was talking about in Chu Lai. But there's just no big, huge celebration of that war. They've moved on. Our guide we had in Hanoi, sharp young man. He was a writer. He'd written 4 or 5 books. And he was probably young, 24, 25 years old. And he voiced the very same thing. He said, I wouldn't join the Communist Party on a bet. And he said, you know, we've got a pretty good thing going here. And they pretty much leave us alone, which surprised me. Like I say, lots of personal freedom. There are no bamboo and straw hooches anymore like we witnessed when we were there. It's all little concrete block homes, and it's amazing. Really, I know I keep saying that, but I'm just blown away.
Sure.
It was another aspect of that trip that I am so thankful for, is that my kids got to see where I had been. Of course, it didn't look or feel anything like it did in 1968, but I think they, you know, felt better about the whole thing after being there, you know, the way it is today. And we met a lot of friends made friends. Our guide on the boat up in Halong Bay, and I text and email back and forth all the time. He sends me shots of his family. He's got little kids that are just gorgeous, and you know, I send him family stuff and pictures of my paintings. Blew him away. I sent all 22 shots of that was in the show to him, and he just couldn't believe it. You know, but several of those shots were of those paintings were shot in Halong Bay, where he lives and works. So yeah, it's been a heck of a ride, I tell you. Yeah, you know, guys, for all of you Vietnam vets that haven't been back, a lot more of you haven't been than have, I'm sure. I would say to you, you would be surprised and joyful, I believe, to see how that country had fared after the war. And I know I've talked to lots of vets that say there's no way I'd go back, and I understand that. For me, it was the thing I needed to do. Yep. Also, our dear friend Jennifer O'Neill has a program as well, which is Healing Through Equine. She's a horse person, and she has a beautiful farm here in town, and it's free for any vets to go through her program. And you know, so I think there's a lot of interest, and hopefully a lot of my fellow veterans that were there are able to find help if they need it, and certainly there is a need for that. But for me, it was the end of a long, long journey, and you know, David Wright likes to say it was a long time ago in a land far away, and that's true. But those things that affected you then stay in your heart, and it helped my heart to go back. That's all I can say.